Welcome into the Door Report. It is episode 177. It is a Thursday night, September the 8th, 2022. We are powered by Alaco Fine Wood Floors. They're family owned and operated for more than 2 decades. Alaco Fine Wood Floors is Nashville and Middle Tennessee's choice for premium quality hardwood floors. Since 1995, Jimmy Alaco and his army of employees have embodied the approach of taking pride in one's craft and providing superior customer service, growing from a one-man shop to a team of 23 professionals who share the founder's passion for quality craftsmanship and customer satisfaction. If you're interested in contacting them, you can find their headquarters at 2505 Winford Avenue over in Berry Hill, or you can call them at 615-356-0303 or log on to alacofinewoodfloors.com. Alaco Fine Wood Floors, serving Middle Tennessee's hardwood flooring needs since 1995. Will, the Wake Forest Demon Deacons are coming to the Music City on Saturday, 11 a.m. kickoff on the SEC Network. SEC Nation is in town. You got all the personalities. Paul Feinbaum will be doing his show from the Commons on Friday. A lot going on, Will, this weekend. Hopefully the rain holds off as well. And we've got a beefy episode for every Vanderbilt fan out there. Of course, we'll dive deep into Wake. We'll get some history of this matchup. Depth chart adjustments. Will, we've seen we had some last week. We've got some this week as well. And we will also get to our 3 keys to victory. The first game where it's actually useful to get to our 3 keys to victory. And I caught up with Stan Cotten, the voice of the Demon Deacons. We keep the play-by-play voice on a roll going from the Wake Forest Sports Network. So he'll join us a little bit later. But Will, it's time. I honestly think this is the biggest game in a while. I mean, we said K-State 2018. I think we both agree on it. Big game, may not feel like it in the city with Vanderbilt fans totally, but I think there is a decent amount of buzz, not just locally but regionally, about this game. There's going to be some eyes on it.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, Billy. Like we always say, you start the season out 2-0, and all of a sudden there's a little bit of buzz starting to circulate. And even though that 2-0 start may be against 2 subpar teams, one being from the FBS level, probably being the worst of the 2, and one being from the FCS level, but you're undefeated. You're 2-0. You've matched your win total from the last 2 seasons combined. So that's going to get some excitement. I once again am going to say, Billy, and they've built up some social media posts around it, and they've built up some different things. Clark Lee saying,
Jordan
bring your
Matthews.
coffee. Dude, 11 a.m. God, that sucks. Any other time, but an 11 a.m. Central Time kickoff. And I would be so excited, but I will be out there tailgating alongside Jacob Scholl. Hopefully see you out there.
Yep.
A few other people will have some breakfast burritos out there for us early. But everything else in the tailgate, swing on by. We'll be out there at 6 a.m. Getting ready bright and early, just as Clark Lee announced and instructed. So I am excited for this matchup. A little bit of hype for the first time in a while since 2018, Kansas State, like we said, before Alabama destroyed that hype. So it's going to be a fun atmosphere, Billy, and I'm going to live it up in that atmosphere until inevitably it somehow comes crashing down because of the news that broke from the opponent pretty recently. I don't know if you've heard it or not, Billy. That's what I was going to ask. Have you heard it?
I think I heard something about
the Wake Forest.
I think I heard something about their quarterback.
1 or 2 people said something about it.
I know. I saw a big tweet from this guy, Pete Thamel. I don't know if it really matters though, but
it won't impact them. It's not impacting the matchup or the outlook.
I don't think it's impacted the betting line either. So
no, not at all.
Not at all. But Sam Hartman is back for the Demon Deacons. We'll dive into that and talk about what that means for this matchup. We'll get to our 3 keys to victory. And we'll give you our predictions. So predictions are back for this week. Whether we have them ready for you or not, we will have both of our predictions ready. Will, it just feels good to have this buzz before a game. We'll get to this podcast eventually, but I'm with you. It just feels good. And whether it ends well for Vanderbilt or not, I think this is a positive step. The fact that you do have anticipation for a game like this. I mean,
this is a gravy game, in my opinion.
Gravy.
I don't know how you feel about it, but they've taken care of business the first 2 games of the year. This is a game that will take a lot of pressure off of the / put a lot onto the NIU game next week.
Mhm.
So I think vice versa, that NIU game is huge for the over-under and wins, securely locking up already 4 games into the season with NIU. But you've taken care of business. You kicked Hawaii's ass week 1. You came out, you dominated Elon outside of like an 11-minute stretch in the
Yeah.
second half of that game. 75% dominated Elon. I think Vanderbilt fans are pretty pleased. So
Yeah. I
I
mean,
think that this
they're
game
pleased.
offers a lot, everything to gain and almost nothing to lose, unless some things happen that we're going to get to in this preview.
Yeah, we will get to the things that Vanderbilt fans are scared of that might be happening, but all of that is coming up. Before we get to the preview, though, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at @door_report and Instagram door.report. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our podcast is available on Anchor, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. And while you're at it, give our podcast 5 stars and a review on iTunes. All right, let's get to the Wake Forest preview. All right, Will, let's dive into it. First, some key information. 11 a.m. kick, early kick. I know you love it. SEC Nation is there pregame. Marty and McGee will be there before SEC Nation. Dave Neal, Deuce McAllister on the call.
My favorite SEC Nation show combined with my favorite kickoff time. Marty and McGee, you know me. I love me some Marty and McGee and some
day. This is your
kicking
kind of day.
Back in a pickup truck with some cowboy boots on. That's me, baby.
Welcome to Nashville. That's what you get. First Bank Stadium is the site. Will, a few key things here. It's Parents Weekend, and I think all these things will affect the crowd. I didn't know this a few days ago, but it is Parents Weekend, so that means you're going to get a good chunk more tickets. I think going to the game. It's the Anchor Dash, and that means basically every freshman is let into the game. And so, we saw it against Ole Miss to open the season. We see it every home game, really, to start the season. We didn't see it against Elon. Genius.
That's move. Good. That's good. Yeah,
that's a genius move to push that back to the Wake game. Will Clark said, "Bring your coffee to the bank." We'll have to. You better have some coffee ready at the tailgate.
We'll have some mimosas ready and coffee. We'll have both sides.
Little. You get both go in there. Stan Cotten, of course, a little bit later will join us, the play-by-play voice for Wake. Will, 17th meeting all time between these two teams. It's interesting to go back and look at some of their matchups before we dive into Wake. Vandy leads the all-time series 10-6, and there's a lot of familiarity with Vanderbilt, this coaching staff, and Wake Forest coaching staff. Clark Lee was Coach Clausen's linebacker coach at Wake in 2016, and he also coached linebacker with Clausen at Bowling Green in 2012. So these two coaches, that's what I can't wait. I can't wait to watch this chess match. It's almost like a couple of high school coaches that are so familiar with each other. And I know that's college football, but that's what it kind of reminds me of, guys that are so familiar with each other. Clark Lee went 2-0 against Wake Forest while he was at Notre Dame. So I know he wasn't the head coach there, but had to go against that Wake defense a lot. Will, going back, last meeting between Vanderbilt and Wake Forest, 2013, Austin Carter Samuels throws up a prayer for Jordan Matthews. J-Matt hauls it in to lead. Carey Spear to the game-winning field goal, 23-21.
That's some good names.
Oh,
good
yeah.
Names you just brought up right there.
That's what I think about when I think of this matchup. I mean, there's not a whole lot of other things that you think about when you think about this matchup. They haven't faced a whole lot. But I think about that, man. And Vandy's won the last 3 in this series. I know it's been a while, but that's what I think about, Will. That crowd, you go back and watch that. I watched the highlights of that a couple of days ago, and crowd was great. Of course, Carey Spear, it finished that one. So that's what I think about Will, Vandy and Wake Forest. But it's crazy, Will, the familiarity aspect. I think that'll come in handy for Clark Lee when you're facing a guy that you've coached under twice. And, the Vanderbilt strength coach this year, Coach Horgan, came from Wake Forest. There's a lot of those similarities, which I think will have an impact on the game.
I think that can only help Vanderbilt. I think familiarity with an offensive coordinator versus a guy that has his handprint very heavily on the defense definitely favors the defensive coach that has knowledge of the offense, because defense is reactionary and offense runs the play. So a lot less is gained outside of maybe a few calls, a few setups, how he's going to utilize personnel or defend XYZ is really gained by having the in-depth knowledge of Clark Lee. Now, the other side is against this unique slow mesh style offense.
Oh, yeah.
That I'm sure we're going to hear the term slow mesh in the game day broadcast and in in the pregame show at least one or two times. People love to use that unique slow mesh style
It's
offense.
fun to say slow mesh.
It is nice to say, but it is weird. It is a very weird offense.
Nobody else does it.
So it's nice to have some familiarity with what is definitely, I won't say the most, but one of the most unique offenses Vanderbilt will face this year. They do have Josh Heupel on the schedule.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's similar to a triple option style of offense, where Hartman will hold it in there for 2, maybe 3 seconds sometimes. So I actually asked Stan Cotten about that. He gets into that, and we'll get more into that when we dive into Wake. But real quick, Will, the depth chart: Quincy Skinner back, Julian Hernandez back. Well, Big. He's back healthy. He's listed as a backup center behind Castillo right now, but they're listed as or on the depth chart. So, but Hernandez is back. That's huge. Rocco Griffin's back, and Ricky Wright shifting over to starting at anchor. And I heard that that was he wasn't starting at anchor. He was starting at a different position last week. So Ricky Wright at anchor. So, Will, that's huge. I mean, I don't know that how much that'll play into the game, but I know having Rocco Griffin back will play into it. And Skinner, just another guy to throw to. I mean, that Wright needs everybody available. Mike Wright in this offense, they need everybody there.
You need more than just McGowan and Shepard out there and your tight ends and Bresnahan and Schoenwald. You need more than 4 guys that embody Junior occasionally, but I wouldn't say somebody that you want to be relying on heavily to be throwing contested balls or big time, big moment catches too. But Rocco just having depth. I mean, against a team like Wake Forest, 20 carries is a little different, and will be a little different for Ramon Davis than 20 carries was against Elon. So having Rocco, who ran so damn well against Hawaii, I'm so happy that he is back. And hopefully that was just more precautionary against Elon than anything. And if it was against an opponent like Wake Forest the week after Hawaii, maybe he would have been able to suit up. That's all speculation, but it seems to work out that way. In the case of both sides, pretty often that guys tend to be able to play through or be over those injuries leading up to a game with an opponent that has potential to actually beat you.
Yeah, there's a common thread there. I wonder if Wake Forest said, "Hey, let's bring Hartman back. Let's clear him before Vanderbilt, not VMI. Maybe let's hold. Let's." I
have a feeling he would have been able to be cleared for week 1. I don't think that they're rushing him back. I just think that they're like no need to even appear to be rushing back, and just give it another week. It can't hurt.
I know Vanderbilt they're an SEC team, but I think that's a sign of respect. I mean, Clausen. Obviously this is between the doctors and Sam Hartman, I think, but maybe there's a little bit of, hey, we need him for Vandy. You never know. This is all speculation, but you never know. Will, let's start with their offense though. First, let's talk about this Wake Forest offense. I know both of us did a lot of research on them. They've got 9 starters back from the ACC's number 2 scoring offense. I mean, they put up some huge numbers. Sam Hartman, 4,228 yards, 39 touchdowns, school record. And in his career, Will, 9,266. He's done a lot. I mean, the second in program history in passing yards in his career. And Will, a thing I've thought about is will he be rusty? Is there going to be any rust for Sam Hartman? I think human nature says yes, but from what I've heard, and I know a lot of this is probably coach speak, but coaches, players, other players have said he's in shape. He's been throwing the ball for a while. He's been practicing the last week or two. And he's been ready to go. I still think when you're facing, an SEC defense on the road, early kickoff, you got to wake up. You got to really wake up, be ready to go. So I'll be interested to see how he kind of eases back into his role. But yeah, well, they've got other weapons around him too. A good running back, Christian Turner, ran hard last week, 13 carries, 2 touchdowns. Another guy behind him, Justice Ellison's really good. A.T. Perry, Will, is a monster. I mean, that guy's 6'5", 200 pounds. He's a physical target that Hartman loves to throw to. He had 15 touchdowns last year. Taylor Morin scares me in the slot, that little slot receiver. He's their punt returner also. And then Keyshawn Williams. Will, they've got depth. They've got depth at receiver. They've got depth at running back. They've got an experienced offensive line. And, I look at this offense and I think they can do some damage against really anybody, not only Vanderbilt. Now I think the key, Will, is rust. I mean, you look at Hartman, human nature says there could be a little bit of rust. I don't know what you think, but I'm not sitting here saying he's going to come out and throw 3 interceptions and look awful, but I don't know that he looks like his full, complete 100% self from last year.
I mean, always a negative, I would say, when a potential under the radar Heisman candidate who accounted for 50 touchdowns the previous season is coming back heading into your game. But yeah, I mean, you would think there's just no way that he is completely in rhythm and ready to rock if he had the blood clot situation close to his collarbone. Even if he did stay in shape, remained mentally prepared and in it, but just couldn't go through certain drills, certain activities, certain things, the rhythm is just going to be a little off. And the offense returned 9 guys, so maybe that's not as much of a return, but they did lose Jakari Roberts, I believe is his name, who also was tied for the most catches on the team with 71 and 8 TDs on the year. So they are returning a lot, but it's not like they're returning everyone. Right. So it's a very, very, very talented offense, but you would think that something with Hartman is just going to be clicking, especially at the beginning of the game. 11 a.m. kickoff. It's going to have a little bit of a weird feel. Maybe it's going to be weird anyway. Coming back a week late, rain would be ideal for Vanderbilt in this game. And almost every game this year, rain is going to be a net benefit for Vanderbilt with the style of offense and a lot of the opponents they are playing. But I want to say he's going to be rusty, Billy. I want to say that, knowing Vanderbilt and how these things tend to go when there are large national storylines that have a majority of the nation rooting behind a person or eyes on that person, and they're coming in to play against Vanderbilt or really any of my teams. I'll include any Nashville team, including the Tennessee Titans in this. It just feels like they have a storybook ending to that return from injury or triumphant defeat over some controversy or something going on in their life. So hopefully Hartman comes out. He struggles. He's rusty. But this is why you were joking about the prediction. That's why I've been struggling with my prediction. I'm still struggling with it because my human nature, it's like the gambling line. When I looked at the gambling line week 1 versus Hawaii, and I looked at Hawaii and I said, any team playing against Hawaii with seeing this line that's from a Power 5 conference, I would be all over it. The only thing that held me back from not putting an obscene amount of money was it being Vanderbilt. The only thing that has me not thinking this gambling market is overreacting to a guy. And I know that sounds crazy. And I'm just cursing Vanderbilt to inevitably have him throw for 700 yards and make up for the week he lost in his Heisman candidacy. I mean, the quarterback last week, threw for 319 yards against VMI. It's not like he came out and had a horrific game. Oh, he's 21 of 29, 288, 3 touchdowns, no picks. 73.4% completion percentage. I mean, he was going to come in, and that was, in my opinion, not going to be where this game for Wake Forest was won or lost. Wake Forest is the more talented team in a lot of spots, and if that talent plays up to their level, they will beat Vanderbilt regardless. Now, Hartman allows for a little more room for error, but the line doubling from where it started out is crazy to me.
Yeah. I'm
just from one guy first week coming back from an injury and only practicing really for a couple days in uppers.
Yeah. 13 is a lot of points on the road in the SEC. I don't care if it's Vanderbilt. They're an improved team. And, I think if you're Sam Hartman, you're sitting there saying, obviously you like the fact that, you're coming back, but this is not the most pleasant welcome back. I mean, you're playing at Vandy, 11 a.m. kick, maybe some rain. Welcome back, Sam. I mean, you get to play Clark Lee, one of the best defensive minds in the country, So I'm with you, though, Will. Clark Lee talked about it earlier this week. This is a system offense. And no matter who the quarterback is, it is a tough offense to defend. I mean, you saw what Griffiths did last week, almost 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. I know it's VMI, but at the same time, this is a full system offense. Clark Lee said that's what we have to defend, no matter who's out there.
I really feel like, and this sounds crazy because Hartman is so talented. He put up those numbers. He's a better pro prospect nationally. I mean, I'm not trying to diss Mike Wright, obviously, with the numbers he's been putting up, but I would say that most people would say Hartman is the preferable quarterback if you had to pick one or the other.
Yeah.
Going into this season. I mean, that's not a slight to Mike Wright. But going into this game on these teams and actual impact on the on-field way that these teams are going to defend the opponent or play this game, Mike Wright being out of this game impacts it 100 times more than having Hartman in or out of this game.
I'm
and that doesn't mean that Hartman's the worst player. That just means that their backup is more experienced and the offense they run doesn't change as much. And
there's
really, Mike Wright is just a completely different player from anything else and is completely irreplicable. So that's where I think this line may be overreacting.
Yeah, Sam Hartman means a lot to his team, but you saw what Griffiths did. And Clausen is such a great offensive mind that, I think you could throw really anybody, in there, and they could do somewhat well because of the weapons around them, a good O-line. So, offense is great. A lot of production. Hartman's done so much in his career. It's his 4th season as a full-time starter. He's played so much football. And good for him. I don't even know if we've mentioned it yet. Good for him that he's back. I really respect the guy. I love the way.
Oh, yeah. We forgot to say the thing we've been saying this whole time, which is the precursor of happy that he's healthy and that he's not, that he's able to play football again. Yeah. Outside of this game. I hope he has a great season outside of this game and he's super rusty.
But one more thing on him, Will, he's a really good runner too. I don't know how much he's going to want to run coming off the injury, whatever you call it. But he had 11 touchdowns on the ground last year. And he is just
64 yards.
Yeah. He has mastered that offense, and Clausen, I guarantee you, is elated to have his guy back. Will, that's the offense. A lot, of course, to talk about with the offense, but their defense. Let's go to their defense. Really bad defense. They were awful last year. They gave up 413 yards per game last season, 5 yards per carry. They surrendered 9, and this is a stat, Will, from the Pick Six Previews magazine. Brett Ciancia does a really good job. I did a little research on Wake. They surrendered 9 explosive rush plays per game, and that's a lot. It's a big number, and that was bottom tier in the country. So, Will, they were statistically one of the worst defenses in the country at the FBS level, especially the Power 5 level. So, you look at this defense, they're in the ACC. It's not like they're playing in the Big 12 or the SEC either. ACC has some good offenses, but I think there's some room for Vanderbilt to attack this defense and have success. I really do. I think not only with Mike Wright's legs, but also taking some shots. And I know there's a little sneak peek to some of my keys to victory there. Won't talk too much more about them, but some of their guys, Will, Kobe Turner, transfer from Richmond, had 6 tackles last week. Big guy up front. They're not huge up front. They're really not. But he is a good player up front, so keep an eye on him. And Will, interesting story here with their linebacker, Ryan Smenda. He's a senior, returning leader in tackles, one of the better linebackers in the ACC. He was held out of last week's VMI game due to a targeting call in the Gator Bowl against Rutgers last season. It's wild. It is wild reading about that when I saw that. And Stan Cotten actually talked about it. And Clausen hated it. He hated the fact this happened. He was, arguing about it with I don't know who, I guess the ACC commissioner not the commissioner, but the head official of the conference eventually made the call, or whoever was calling that game. But wild. Wild story. So he's going to be ready. He is going to be ready to rock with probably a chip on his shoulder. So that's huge. They've got, you could say they've got their captain on either side of the ball back. Sam Hartman, Ryan Smenda, really good linebacker. And one more guy, Will, I want to mention is Brendan Harris, Vanderbilt transfer. He played last week at 4 tackles. And, obviously Harris was a backup last year for the most part, and he was going to be a backup this year anyway. I just thought it was kind of interesting to note he's out there and he'll play. He's going to And, Will, I point to that. Nothing against Brendan Harris, but that's a guy that Wake values probably. And, that I just don't. This is not a great defense, and they're used to ACC type offenses. I think Vanderbilt, not only in the run game, but with McGowan and Shepard, can have some chances. So, Will, this defense, obviously not as much to talk about as the offense, but they don't have a lot of depth either. So there's definitely areas for Vanderbilt to attack this defense.
Yeah, I think there is some confusion when I was reading a lot of the Wake Forest articles and a lot of their evaluations of this VMI game and the depth chart and their expectations for the defense. And I think there was a misunderstanding of the difference in depth and playing a lot of guys. And there's a massive difference in those two things. And I know it's against their FCS opponent. They jumped out 17 points quick, but they were up 17-0 at the end of the first quarter against VMI. Wake Forest was, but all I was reading, they had 28 guys play. They had 19 play 20 or more snaps on defense, with 28 recording a tackle. So they had a lot of guys that were active in that game. To me, that is not really as much of a positive when you're coming off a bad defense. That's the difference to me. Is if that was Georgia coming off of last season, or just traditionally, or Vanderbilt coming off of one of the years underneath Derek Mason where they had a good defense and couldn't move the ball, like 2015, then I would be feeling good, saying you're adding on depth to a lot of returning talent from a good defense, but you lost most of the key guys from your secondary. That was the only mediocre part of a really bad defense. And you returned one guy that had 16 and a half tackles for loss last season. But other than that, you don't have really anything. I mean, you have the safety that you mentioned that was suspended week 1.
Linebacker,
you have linebacker. Yeah. I have it written down a safety. So maybe they run the 4-2-5. So it might be maybe that tweener type guy.
Yeah, who knows? The anchor for Wake Forest. Maybe he's that.
Yeah, something like that.
But
they don't really. I don't see this defense being able to stop the role the Vanderbilt offense is on. There's a reason this over-under's at 65, 66 points, because there are going to be a lot of points scored on Saturday. And I think that Vegas was maybe awakened to the idea that Wake Forest would score a lot of points, but maybe Vanderbilt would also tack on a few. I think Vanderbilt's sitting at like the 24 and a half point Vegas line mark, and Wake Forest is sitting around that like 42, 41 and a half individual team points line. So
sounds about
that's where they're sitting. But I think that one is the Vegas line of 50-50 of how bad Wake Forest defense is and how good Vanderbilt's offense has looked through 2 weeks statistically and scoring wise. And the other is not necessarily anything to do with Vanderbilt's defense. What you saw late against Elon is only partial to it. It's really just Wake Forest, man. They were a machine.
Yeah.
They were a machine. In spite of that defense last year, they were able to win games and go 11-3.
Yeah. And when you go 11-3, I don't care who you play, what conference you're in. That's impressive. That's really impressive. And, they went to the Gator Bowl. They had to play Rutgers in that weird, kind of, I don't know. Rutgers was kind of plugged in there. They beat Rutgers. But yeah, that's the Wake defense. Obviously nothing really that impressive. And Will, one more thing that you hit on that defense, they weren't particularly a good defense last year, and they lost 3 of their 4 guys in the secondary that started last year. So, and I'll actually get more to that in the keys to victory. Well, let's get to it though. 3 keys to victory. Of course, after every game, we always get to our 3 key takeaways. But this week, we kick off our 3 keys to victory. And, Will, I'll start here, and I'll go with number 1. This is gonna shock you. Number 1, establish the run. As classic football guy as it gets. But there's a lot to this, Will. There's a lot to establishing the run. First, I think it helps a lot that Rocco's back. We just talked about it. Rocco will help establish the run. Chase Gillespie is going to have to get out there and do something. For 4 quarters, you can't rely on Ray Davis like they pretty much did against Elon. I mean, I think not having Rocco hurt them against Elon. And so they got Ray, they got Rocco. Of course, Chase is going to have to be relied upon as well. Not having Patrick Smith right now, I think they'd love to have him as well. But Will, against teams that finished with a winning record, Wake Forest allowed 48 points per game last season. That was second worst in the FBS. One of the worst defenses in Power 5 last season. I mean, let's face it. So, they also surrendered 196 rushing yards per game. That's 109th in the FBS. They gave up 5 yards a pop. Now, 5 yards per carry, obviously not, there's worse defenses out there, but that's not great. 5 yards a carry, it's really not ideal. And you're not, you're playing in the ACC. That ACC is only going downhill right now, especially in terms of their physical play and their offense. They gave up a lot of explosive runs, like I talked about. Will, Vandy had 404 rushing yards against Hawaii. They had almost 180 against Elon. Those are 2 really good numbers. Yes, it's Hawaii and Elon, but I think they can put up big numbers just like they did against those 2 teams against Wake. I think they can do the same. So establishing the run, it goes hand in hand with sustaining drives. Clarkley has talked all week about sustaining drives. One way you sustain drives, get first downs and run the ball. Vanderbilt, they have to establish the run in this game, or else they have no shot of winning and competing in this game. They've also got to will control the tempo. I think running also, not only does it slow the clock, and if you have success running the football, you can start to control the tempo of the game. But if they don't, they'll be in trouble. So, Will, one more stat. These stats are crazy on the Wake defense, by the way. I was looking at a lot of these. 4 different opponents last season that played against Wake Forest rolled up 300-plus rushing yards on them. And one of those teams was Army's triple option. And, I know they do that to a lot of defenses, but they ran for 400-plus yards and put up 56 points on Wake Forest. So, and Vanderbilt has implemented some triple option ideals and schemes in their offense. And I think they should do that more in this game. And I think they will, because you look at that, Clarkley knows that. And Vandy, like I said, they've thrown some triple option wrinkles in there. So all that to say, Will, if they don't establish the run, and if they can't get push up front with that O-line, the big uglies and the grease gang, I don't see Vanderbilt competing in this game, much less even winning it or having a shot to win. So they've got to establish the run. I know that's classic football guy stuff right there, Will, but that's my number one. They got to establish a run. I couldn't think of anything else more important than that.
Yeah, they have to, and they should. My number one key is the opposite side of the ball, and that is going to be creating pressure. And that against this slow mesh style offense is going to be so key in being able to slow it down. Vanderbilt's not going to stop this defense. Wake Forest is going to put up points. They're going to put up points against every single opponent they play. The key to this is going to be the bend, don't break, and slow them down and control the ball with the run game, like you said, on offense against an awful run defense in Wake Forest. I mean, if this was any other non-top 25 team, you'd view that defense and say, this team must be two wins max, 3 wins max. Yeah. I mean, it's truly awful. It's down there with like what UConn was last year. And so I think that's being sugar-coated around a lot of these previews, whether it's the Wake Forest side or the Vanderbilt side, because they only gave up 10 points last week to VMI. VMI's bad. VMI, that's an FCS opponent. Don't look at that. Vanderbilt's defense is not good either, and in week 1, they only gave up 10 points to an opponent. So Vanderbilt is going to have to run the ball. They should, but on the other side of the ball, to let them run the ball and not get caught up in some type of shootout game, which Vanderbilt has no chance, they are going to have to disrupt the timing of kind of this triple option oriented offense. And I want to read one quote from Ethan Barr. And I'll go in, and Ethan Barr on the slow mesh offense, end quote, he said, they like to hold on to the ball for a long time, so they have options and give themselves options on offense. We realize that we have to eliminate that option by playing fast at the linebacker level, staying true to our gaps, be gap sound, and keep them contained within the tackle box. He holds on to the ball in the backfield for 2-3 seconds, like you mentioned at the beginning, and makes the linebackers either step up and commit to the run game. What a guy on the outside overcommit, crash down, and keeps it. If the linebacker steps up, he can hit that mesh crosser over the top of him. If he doesn't step up, he or can run it, or he can hand it off up the middle for a 4 to 6 yard gain automatically. It's very tough to defend. How you defend it is winning one-on-one battles that the offensive line has to hold their blocks for long periods of time. They have 4 returning starters on that offensive line, but if there's anywhere that this offense has holes, it's that offensive line being able to be beaten in situations where these plays take a long time to develop. It is a read option type offense, and it looks that way, but it would be like watching Tennessee's offense on 0.25x speed. That's literally what it's like. Everything that Josh Heupel does, imagine relatively similar concepts, but the opposite, like completely differently, like making the defense completely commit versus keeping them on their toes and keeping them off balance. So it's a really weird offense to watch, and watching it against VMI, they obviously weren't showing too much, but I watched a little bit of Wake Forest last year. It's a unique challenge, and Clarkley and staff have their work cut out for them.
No doubt about it. And Will, they make most of their reads post snap, after the snap, not prior to the snap. But that's a key, there's not many people out there doing that. I mean, post snap reads where you do, I mean, 2-3 seconds, that's a long time. I
Because
mean,
you got to protect, man.
Yeah, that you got to protect. So if we were a Wake Forest podcast, you got to protect your quarterback. That's what we talk about. But we're a Vanderbilt podcast. We're talking about how you got to get pressure. That's my second key, Will.
Wow.
Pressure smarter, not harder. That's what I'll say. And I obviously, pressure, bring the guy, bring him in, bring 3-4, play blitz ball. No, that's not. They need to blitz smartly. Clark talked about playing defense with patience this week. You've got, just like Wake does with offense, you've got to play defense with patience. If you get too antsy, you get too jittery, you're gonna screw up something defensively, and then boom, Hartman sees it, and boom, he's got his receiver down the field. So pressure smarter, not harder. The slow mesh, we know, has caused problems for all kinds of defenses, even Clemson, even some of the best defenses out there. But Clemson proved that if you get pressure, if you get inside, if you get by these offensive linemen, you will have success. You will disrupt the slow mesh. So part of what Vanderbilt has to do, they have to eliminate the mesh. Eliminate that mesh point. Make them stop doing it. Make Coach Clawson say, "Oh, screw this. Screw this slow mesh stuff. We're not doing this anymore." You got to confuse Hartman with pressures so that he's sitting back there going, "What the hell's going on? What how many guys are they bringing out? Where are these guys going? When's Anthony Orji coming at me off the edge? Where's Ethan Barr going?" So eliminate the mesh. I know that's not easy. It's definitely not easy to do. And they, Wake Forest, that's what they want to do. But it's not like they do it every play. This is not, this is not arm. Like, I think some people get it confused with, this is not the triple option. It is a kind of it is, I don't know what you'd say, but it
would be like saying if Vanderbilt doesn't run a read option offense, they run a read option style offense. Not every play is read option, but their base package is.
Triple option style. It's not a triple option offense.
That's why I'm adding the style in at the mesh style offense. I was just it's a lot tougher to say, so a lot more S's involved.
If you are out of control, though, that's what I'm trying to say. If you're out of control blitzing, and I don't know that Clark is going to do this. I don't think he will. But Hartman will destroy you. If he sees that you're out of position or you're coming at him off the blind side, he sees that, boom, he hits his guy down that left sideline where you left. So he is so good at reading the defense. So Vanderbilt's got to be smarter, outsmart Hartman out there, outsmart Clawson. And I really do think defensively they can have success, but you've got to be so disciplined. There's a lot of pressure on Orji and Barr. Those linebackers, I am not jealous of those two guys on Saturday at 11 a.m. and really everybody on the defense. And Will, this is when it just hurts not to have Davion Davis and Devin Lee and depth and Baps. I mean, you need everybody. You got to get pressure, but you got to do it smartly. So you got to do it. You cannot be out of control. So I know, we've got the same exact, key to victory there, number 2. But just a little shift there. You got to be smart with it, not out of control. So that's my second key to victory for Vandy.
Yeah, I'm glad you said the run thing as your number 1, because I didn't even have that written down. Because my number 2 is defense as well. Well, kind of defense as well. Because it's mostly going to be based around the offense, and that's winning the turnover battle. This Wake Forest defense, like we have said, is not good. We've mentioned that their offense is good. The one thing that Wake Forest had going for it last season was their secondary was actually not that bad. They lost a lot of talent out there, but they had 15 picks as a team. Vanderbilt, for example, last season, they were pretty good at creating turnovers. Granted, some of those were fumbles, but they had 13 as a team. So this Wake Forest team was opportunistic in the secondary. And Mike Wright, 6 touchdowns on the year so far, no interceptions. If he throws no interceptions in this game, Vanderbilt has a chance. If Mike Wright throws 2 interceptions in this game, Vanderbilt has no chance. 1 interception, we'll see. It'll depend. But 2+ interceptions, that is my line in the sand as far as keys to the game. Limit it to 1 interception or less. I'm trying to get like stats. I liked how Scholl did that in his 6-pack. I'm trying to have definitive things written down. So I'll say the one interception or less for Vanderbilt, and 2 total turnovers or less in general. So allowing 1 fumble, but only 1 interception from Mike Wright, because that would just be killer. allowing that secondary, because they did have one guy that I had written down that you didn't mention in their secondary, Isaiah Wingfield, I think is the name there. He actually really had two plays that should have been interceptions against VMI. He had one that was called back for a roughing the passer penalty that he did intercept and take back for a pick six. And he had another where he broke on the ball and just dropped it. I mean, it should have been two interceptions. So this is the best secondary that Vanderbilt has faced. It is not, in my opinion, the best front. We'll say 5-6 because it's a 4-2-5 style. Right. We'll say the front six they have faced. I truly believe that Elon's was just as good. Maybe they don't have the talent level at with the one guy's name that's slipping in my mind on their defensive line. I don't think I wrote it down.
For Wake Forest?
For Wake Forest, 16 and a half. Yeah, 16 and a half tackles for loss last year. That guy's the most talented individual player. But as far as the rest of the defense, Vanderbilt has to be able to run the ball against them, and they cannot create turnovers in the passing game. On the other side, the defense has to continue doing it. They've done it since Karkley's been here, even last season. If there was one thing about this defense you could say that was positive, they created turnovers. That needs to continue. They've done it the first 2 games of the year. That is going to be the key in keeping this thing close enough to get Wake Forest worried, because in my opinion, the pressure is on that other sideline. I don't see Vanderbilt going into this game with a ton of pressure unless things start to maybe look like they could get out of hand early.
Great key, Will. I definitely thought about that. The turnover one, they've got to get turnovers, or else they just don't have a shot. Speaking of shots, Will, my number 3 key is take shots. Take shots down the field. And so Vanderbilt hasn't had success in doing that this year. Obviously, we've seen Mike Wright attempt to throw it downfield to Will Sheppard. Hasn't worked. It hasn't really worked. They need to hit on those on Saturday. Well, here's a stat for you. Wake's top 3, maybe not necessarily a stat, but a fact, really. Wake's top 3 defensive backs, as you hinted at, all gone to the NFL. So they had a good, NFL. Like, those were NFL guys last year in the secondary, gone. So anytime you lose that much talent from one position, you're going to take a step back that next season. They've got a couple starting safeties that they're still recovering from injuries from spring ball. So they're a little banged up back there. But like I said, anytime you're losing that much, you're gonna take a step back. Pass defense was very average at best last year. Last season they certainly didn't improve this year. This is another area where I think Vanderbilt can find success with Will Sheppard, Jaden McGowan. Literally, I think, 2 or 3 times, if you're Joey Lynch, look at McGowan and just say, beat your man down the field. Mike's going to look down at you. If he's got you, he's going to throw it. If not, he's going to tuck it and run. Same thing for Sheppard. I know Sheppard's not the speed demon that McGowan is, but I do think Sheppard, with his height and his physical nature and stature, he can make some plays. Mike Wright's got to put it there. He's got to have the time. All this requires Mike Wright to have time in the pocket and throw an accurate ball down the field. We've seen him attempt to do it. They haven't actually completed that yet, other than the 75-yard strike to Jaden McGowan, a long ball down the sideline. We just haven't seen those. And, Vanderbilt has attempted them. They haven't worked. So I do think this is a secondary. Like Elon's secondary, they had some players. I think Wake Forest has more depth. They're an ACC program. But I think there is an opportunity for Vanderbilt in this game to catch Wake Forest and their back end of that defense, their secondary, off guard, because they are inexperienced. They relied on 3 NFL guys last year to carry back there. And I know they've got Brendan Harris, but, he's not even going to start back there. And so, they've got some inexperience there. I know they're an ACC defense, which, I don't think that's saying much either. So I not only with the run game, Will, can they have success? I think they can also see success deep down the field. Take your shots, see if you've got a chance, and don't give up on it either. If you're a receiver, McGowan, Sheppard, say there's a bounce, say there's a hot, a pop off the hand, stay with it, because we've seen that happen too. So number 3, Will, take shots. I know it's 11 a.m. There's not going to be many shots taken from the crowd with that early, but Vanderbilt needs to take shots down the field with Joey Lynch, Mike Wright, Sheppard, McGowan, maybe even Skinner too. Just take shots, take the chances, because you'll need them. If you cash in on one of them, Will, that could be another touchdown for you that you might not have gotten. So that's my last one, take shots down the field. So there you have it. There you have it.
There it is.
I love your turnover. I love the
Well,
turnover.
I've still got my third one here, Billy.
Oh God, forgetting that.
Yeah, you
Only
started
giving you
out.
two. Only giving you.
I'm gonna get two keys. My third one is going to be start fast, and a lot of that. I mean,
Oh,
that
recognize that one.
yeah, that's a familiar one, and a lot of that has to do with just what Vanderbilt has done early, and most of the times when that's been given in the past. But this is more based on the opponent. I would say normally that a guy coming back from injury that's maybe started 1 year, been in the system for a year, lost a lot of guys from the offense, whatever. I would say that the beginning, either way, at the beginning, you can spin it one direction or the other. You could say if they jump out early, they had some scripted plays, but they're going to run out as the game progresses. Defense will be able to make more adjustments because they have a limited amount of plays that the quarterback's comfortable with. I don't see that being an issue with Hartman or this Wake Forest offense with the amount of experience they have. So with starting fast, it's all going to be based on, I think there is no way that Hartman is going to come out and for that whole first half play flawlessly. I just can't see it with the lack of reps that he's had leading up to fall camp. There's just no way he is 100% in sync. So Vanderbilt needs to do something that they haven't done very often, but they did last week, and that is score points early, get out to a lead, and or by the end of that first quarter, first half, be within striking distance. That means be within a score at halftime. So when I say start early, completely throughout the game, just stay in it and be even or within a score at half. And I know those expectations may sound low, but I don't believe that they are against a top 25 team coming off the season that Vanderbilt had last year. I don't want to get drawn too much into this hype of the first two games. Of what we've seen. I think some things are going to be exposed here in Wake Forest when we get to our predictions, but I was torn on this prediction, but I think I've settled down on one side of it after thinking it through during this podcast.
I'm glad you've settled down. Well, I'm not glad you've settled into a pick because we need it. We need that pick. The people need it. That's what they want when they listen to the Door Report. Your pick. All right. Well, so there's three keys to victory for Vanderbilt. There's a lot of keys in this one. I think, sustaining drives, obviously your fast start, like you mentioned, and defensively, you got to get pressure. There's a lot that you could throw out there. Thought we did a pretty nice job. Let's get to predictions. Well, I'll start here. I didn't have to think about this one a whole lot. Polar opposite of you, I guess. Wake Forest is who they are. They're going to do what they do. And no matter who they're playing, they're going to find offensive success. And the fact that Sam Hartman's back, I'm not hopping on the Wake Forest -13 train. I don't think they win by 2 touchdowns. But I do think they put up points. I think Vanderbilt puts up points as well. I think Wake wins by a touchdown. I thought of maybe making it 2 touchdowns, but I said to myself, I think Vanderbilt, I think they keep it close. I think they're in this game. I think they keep it close, but I just don't see Vanderbilt's defense holding up for 4 quarters against this type of high-powered offense led by their captain back who's played 12 years of college football, who is one of the best. Let's face it, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and he is going to be drafted. Like, this is a legit NFL prospect at quarterback. I just think he's got too much experience. This whole team has too much experience, especially offensively, and their system is so good. It's so that they've been in it for so long. There's continuity there that, we didn't see with Hawaii, of course. Elon had a little bit more of that signs of continuity with their team and their coaching staff. Clarkley is in his 2nd year. Dave Clawson is in his 9th year, I'm pretty sure. So what he has established there, really impressive. I think that's what potentially down the road Vanderbilt could eventually look like, but not right now, not this year. And, I hope I'm wrong. Well, I really do. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Vanderbilt comes out here and, does have a fast start and finds a way to win this game. I just don't see it happening. I think Vanderbilt does cover, though. I would hammer Vanderbilt. I think 13 and a half, whatever it ends up being, way too many points. I would hammer Vanderbilt there in the points. Also take the over. That's what I would do. 65 and a half, I think it's at right now. So I would take the over. I would take Vanderbilt, but Wake to win it outright. 38-31 is my final score. Wake Forest over Vanderbilt. I was tempted to put Wake into the 40s. But, you know, I think Vanderbilt's defense will find a little bit of success, you know, but fourth quarter, I think Wake tacks on like 2 or 3 more touchdowns. So, you know, I just don't think Vanderbilt can hang in there, but I think it'll be close. And I think it's, you know, tiny step forward, tiny step forward if you want to say that. But I've got Wake 38, Vanderbilt 31.
Yeah, Vanderbilt just can't get their butt kicked. That's the only way that this game can come out and be a failure is 2-0 start, a little bit of hype, you know, picking up,
And
putting
that's
out
what
an
I think
announcement,
can
getting
happen.
people to come.
Like, that's
Yes,
what I
and
think.
it has potential.
I think it has that scary potential in the fourth quarter. Vanderbilt's dead. They're gassed. Boom. Hartman snaps on it, and they drop 3 touchdowns to just kind of put the icing on top. Then you see Mitch Griffiths. Like, I think that can happen as well. But I don't think it will, but there's potential.
Yeah, I'm like 80% right there. Like, I'm pretty confident in my prediction. I would say, or I'll say 70%, and we'll say 20% on the side that I just see Hartman coming out and lighting it up, just coming out career game because of what the issues Vanderbilt showed in one-on-one matchups in the secondary. That's all that they're going to have against Wake Forest, and Elon already exposed that issue. Vanderbilt creating pressure is literally the worst possible issue and thing that they could have targeted is what they're looking to do based on what this defense for Clarkley did last year, struggling to create pressure. But on the other side, Wake Forest defense looks at Vanderbilt's offense and says, this is the worst type of matchup or type of offense we could possibly play. So I don't know if I'm as confident in the points for Vanderbilt as you are, but the over seems low to me. I just don't see any way that this thing stays where you don't see one team hitting the 40s on the scoreboard. The 10% side that is not going to be my prediction is Hartman coming out rusty, which is natural. I mean, you're just not going to be in sync. Vanderbilt runs all over them. We saw less talented teams with relatively similar offenses come out and run all over a better Wake Forest team than our defense than you're seeing this year. But I just don't see Vanderbilt's offense being able to slow them down in all reality. And I think that Vanderbilt's offense has had some things work out right, and they have a good amount on film now where they're not going to shock and awe anybody with the redesign of offense or personnel usage. So I'm going to go with Wake Forest 48. And I think that might be low based on their point output last season. But the only reason that I struggled is I initially had them less than that. I had them at like 41 until I dug into last season, just because I think Vanderbilt will be able to chew some clock because I got Wake Forest 48, Vanderbilt 35. Okay. I'm expecting we don't see Big Leg Joe in this game. Clarkley has shown a tendency through the first 2 games in situations when I've always wanted teams to
go for it,
to going for it on 4th down, and against a Wake Forest offense that's been putting up this many points. That's something I wanted to get out in this prediction. Is outside of specific spots, I'd be pretty surprised if we see the field goal unit trotted out too much against this Wake Forest team, and I think that's a weapon that Clark will be saving for some different matchups later in the season. But I think he's kind of looked at things, and early in the year, even at times I've disagreed with the actual play call and said, I can't coach this game like I'm coaching Notre Dame. I have to coach this game like I'm coaching Vanderbilt. And that was an issue that we had last year, is he was coaching the game like he was the blue blood program. You're not the blue blood program. You probably will never be perceived as anything close to the blue blood program. So you have to take things that are maybe 50-50 on that chart. You always take the higher risk, higher reward option when you're that team. And that goes against everything that is built inside of me when I look at data and everything. But things are just different when you're that underdog. So, and I also want to give a big shout out to Big Leg Joe, only allowing 1 kickoff return so far this year for 16 yards.
How about that?
You need to continue that as a bonus key to the game, is kick every ball out the back of the end zone, because that is an absolute weapon.
Yeah, and another thing, Will, they've got a good punt returner. Taylor Morin is he's a little white kid. He's like 5'10", but he's fast, and he's shown some not only flashes, but he's real talent at that punt return spot. Good slot receiver as well. So really intrigued though, Will, as a whole, to just see what goes on. The first, I know we say this about almost every game, but really in this game, the first couple possessions for Wake, we're going to find out. Vanderbilt has got to buckle their chin straps and be ready to play right away if they want to compete in this game. And I think the Elon game, the struggles in that Elon game that we saw came at a good time for this Vanderbilt team. They can fix those this week. Hopefully, we see that. And they take them to this Wake Forest game. Obviously we've talked about the rain, early kick, decent amount of eyes on this game, maybe a little bit of pressure on Hartman. But he's not new. He's not, he's not new to this. I mean, he's
Yep. The
he's been around the block.
experience is what ultimately part of me wanted. Everything else in this game is trending tick marks on an upset. When I run through my list, returning a main player from injury is always very high on my list, regardless of sport. But other than the matchup with Vanderbilt's offense, Vanderbilt having one more game as kind of a warm-up preseason type game against lesser competition, coming off how that game against D-Line ended, where it's like you kind of end that game even though you won. You end kind of feeling like, we have some things to tighten up really before Wake Forest. So I think that's good trending in that direction. And I think Wake Forest coming off of kicking VMI's butt and playing a bunch of dudes that aren't going to play against Vanderbilt for those late game snaps is going to help. That is where the good things end. Everything else for Wake Forest is like the opposite of that stuff having an effect. Experienced head coach, continuous guys coming back that are experienced in the system, unique system, experienced quarterback with, and I want to repeat it, a lot of experience on offense. I think that's the part that we said at the beginning, and I know people might take that out of context. We were talking about the movement of Hartman. That is part of the reason that I don't think that against Vanderbilt, it should be having as much of a line movement, because the offensive line is so experienced. And actually the number 2 player on almost every single team, and in the NFL, this is more visible in moving a line, is the center on an offensive line. That's actually worth about 2.5 points minimum if he's out of the game, because he's the quarterback of the offensive line. So number 1's quarterback, and number 2 is actually usually center, even over a star running back or receiver, defensive player. It will move the line more if the center, like Ben Jones or something for the Titans, is out of the game. So everything else for Wake Forest, man, is just a nightmare. Their offense versus our defense. So I'm hoping that my negativity and glass half empty is somehow going to send good omens into the universe, and I'm going to be blessed with not being correct. But I have a feeling, man, he's going to tear it up. Hartman is going to tear it up.
Well, it's not like, that's out there, Will, but it's not like there aren't reasons to believe Vanderbilt will compete either.
Mm-hmm.
There's reasons on both sides of this argument.
I think we'll move the ball. That's also what I'm saying. My prediction wasn't a butt whooping.
Right. Both teams are going to put up a lot of points. We know that. We know that's for sure. But what offense is going to be more dominant and stay on the field more? That I think it's going to be Wake's, and so does Will. Will, one more thing I'll say before we get to the interview with Stan Cotten, voice of the Demon Deacons. Weird things must happen on Saturday for Vanderbilt to stay in this game.
I like that.
Weird things usually do happen on Saturday morning, 11 a.m. kickoffs on West End at Vanderbilt Stadium, First Bank Stadium now. Will, they just do. They just do. No matter, now, I don't know if I'll say no matter who they're playing, but it's not like they're facing a Georgia or an Alabama where it's impossible. So just keep that in mind. I mean, weird things must happen. Weird things like turnovers. Weird thing like Hartman slipping in the wet turf and fumbling it, Vanderbilt recovering it, things like that.
Man, the direction these two programs have gone since 2013.
Oh my, polar opposite.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Pretty crazy.
Pretty crazy. I mean, last memory of Vanderbilt Wake Forest in Nashville is Carter Samuels lobbing it up to Matthews and him just mossing
saving a game that should not have been close because Vanderbilt was the better team, which is funny.
Classic.
But I would also want a little comparison thing I wanted to throw in before we end it or whatever we're doing. Before we head into the interview, I guess my bad. I wasn't a part of the interview, so my apologies on that. Billy scheduled it at 1 p.m. During my work day.
I asked you. I asked you. At least I asked.
But the one thing you mentioned is running with 11 touchdowns, and I wanted to say that he's more of he's not Mike Wright running the football. He's not even a Patton Robinette. He is a capable runner, and I would compare him to a guy you just mentioned, Austin Carter Samuels. Running the football. He can make a guy miss. If it's a defensive lineman, he's going to get around the edge against him. A slower linebacker, he'll get around the edge, but he's not running. He's not running away from any cornerbacks or safeties like Mike Wright or guys in Vanderbilt's past like Robinette.
Yeah, and he shouldn't be because you're risking injury and you've got a potential NFL career ahead of you. So, but yeah,
Andrew Luck-esque.
Yeah. Happy for Sam Hartman though. And, I think Vanderbilt fans should be glad that he is playing. Obviously it's tough, but say you do compete and say maybe you pull it off. They've got Hartman, and you can say, hey, we did it they did it with Hartman. So, obviously.
This would be a catapulting victory.
Oh
A
my gosh.
catapulting victory for Vanderbilt.
Will,
It would turn that game against NIU in game 4 into like this going 4-0 and being a legitimate national media attention getter. Would be this game. Would no longer be a novelty at 2-0, putting up 52.5 points per game.
Yeah, we've talked about shifting the fan base's perspective. Mm-hmm. This would do that. I guarantee you this would do that. And, the crowd, we haven't touched on that. I don't think it's going to be particularly great. It'll be better. It'll be better than what we've seen. I think Wake will bring a decent chunk. I asked Stan about that. He said, they haven't been in Nashville since 2013. There'll be a lot of black and gold. Good for Vandy. Good for public relations. Good for TV viewing as well. But 11 a.m. kick, SEC Nation. Dave Neal on the call. I've always liked him doing the games. We'll both be there. If you do need a tailgate spot, lot 2 closest to the on-campus housing. So if you need a place to hang out, go stop by the TDR tailgate tent at just outside First Bank Stadium. So 11 a.m. kick. Well, we've got Stan Cotten coming up, the voice of the Demon Deacons, Wake Forest Sports Network. We dive more into the matchup. Coming up next with Stan Cotten, you're listening to The Door Report, powered by Alaco Fine Wood Floors. Welcome back into The Door Report. I'm happy now to be joined by Stan Cotten, the play-by-play voice of Wake Forest football, part of the Wake Forest Sports Network with Learfield Sports. He's entering year 27 of calling Wake football on the radio. We've got an 11 a.m. kickoff on Saturday, Vanderbilt and Wake Forest on the SEC Network. Stan, really appreciate you taking the time to join us here. And I hear you have a few ties to Nashville.
Yeah. First, Billy, thanks for the invite. My pleasure. Always fun talking about Wake football. I've got a sister who's lived in Nashville, I don't know, 20, 25, 30 years. I forget how long, but a long time. And born and raised in Knoxville, parents still there, wife's family there. So we're all ingrained in the Volunteer state, and certainly have an appreciation for Nashville and that area. And certainly for Vanderbilt, game kind of scares me. That Commodores look pretty good.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll talk about Vanderbilt, of course, from your perspective. But, we brought you on here to dive into Wake Forest this season. And, of course, the news that Sam Hartman has been cleared to play. A lot of reaction in Vegas to it. The betting line has gone up right away after that news. Not surprising. How would you describe what he means to this team and what he has meant to this program over the past 4 years he's played?
Yeah, hard to measure, Billy. Yeah, hard to measure. Yeah, who can keep count now with COVID years and everything else, red shirts and all that. It's hard to measure a guy like that, what he means to your team. Wake is certainly deep enough at most positions to have a good football team, and miss a guy, but you miss kind of your bell cow, your quarterback, a guy who's been around for so long. And that had to hurt. I know when the news broke, it was just kind of a punch in the gut. I mean, you felt number one for Sam, just personally, you feel for any young person that puts so much into whatever endeavor it is, and all of a sudden that's gone in the blink of an eye. But thankfully, the medical situation took 3-4 weeks to clear up for Sam. And number one, he's back healthy, just pure and simple. And the fact that he can play football now is kind of icing on the cake. But he's just a great guy to have in the locker room, a great ambassador for Dave Clawson's football team, great student, all those things. And on top of that, he's a really good football player, a very cerebral quarterback, as I think you have to be probably to be effective in Dave Clawson's system. And Warren Ruggiero, I want to give certainly credit to Wake's offensive coordinator, who's kind of a sneaky genius with regard to what Wake does offensively. But Sam is, one of the team captains, very well liked across the board on this team, and to have him back in the fold, back in the starting lineup, has to be a shot in the arm for Wake Forest coming up in this game. No question about it.
Stan, you mentioned Ruggiero, the offensive coordinator there at Wake Forest, and he's only one of the similarities and kind of connections from the Wake Forest staff and the Vanderbilt staff. Of course, Clark Lee has coached under Dave Clawson 2 separate times, at Bowling Green in 2012, Wake Forest in 2016. And, there's so many connections, so many parallels. Does that make this matchup more appealing, more kind of anticipated? Because, it's almost like a high school matchup where you got a lot of coaches going back and forth and a lot of familiarity. So does that make you more excited to call a game where, hey, this could be competitive?
Oh, I don't know. Certainly, it adds a layer to the story with Coach Lee and a couple other guys there too that have been with Coach Clawson. But and Coach and I talked about this on his radio show on Wednesday night. It's a bunch of smart guys out there trying to figure the other out. I mean, all these guys are really good football coaches. They wouldn't be at Vanderbilt, they wouldn't be at Wake Forest if they weren't. And so to watch them kind of have their chess match on Saturday will be a lot of fun. The fact that they know one another, they understand one's tendencies, all those types of things, how they coach, how they motivate players. And so how do they figure out how to get around that? Will that be something we can actually see on the field? Probably not, but just the maneuvering, the X's and O's and all those things, it'll be fun to see how this game shakes out. That'll certainly be part of the fabric of the tale we tell come Saturday.
Well, last week it was VMI, a big win over VMI. What did you learn about this Wake Forest team and kind of some of the differences with this year's team and this year's roster as opposed to last season with guys coming in, guys coming out, of course, with the transfer portal being very active. But after last week's win over VMI, what were some of the things you learned early on about this Wake team?
Well, number one, I think we found out Wake has a really good backup quarterback, Mitch Griffiths. He was terrific in his first start, did everything that you could possibly expect from a young man making his first start in a college game. One thing, too, that Coach Clawson has talked an awful lot about is the fact that he was able to play 50 players 10 or more plays. That I think, we have been thinking that these last 3-4 years that the depth at Wake Forest has really begun to take root at a lot of different positions. And I think that played out in the VMI game, playing so many players. And it was about, roughly split between offense and defense. And so what we kind of thought actually bore out with the fact that, Wake's got a, pretty widespread depth among the players, and that usually means success. And Coach Clawson has built that depth over time, and he's been very public in his take about Wake football, in that it's kind of a developmental program. They're not going to get 5-star athletes typically at Wake Forest, so you're going to get those who maybe aren't as highly recruited as other schools get, but Wake's going to coach them up, and they're going to hopefully keep them for 4 years, 5 years, heck, with all the COVID and stuff, 6 and 7. Not just at Wake. That's happened at other places too. So, but they've developed enough depth here to not make Wake Forest have such an up and down football trajectory. Over the years, that's kind of the way it's been. But under Dave Clawson, I think you could certainly make the argument that the Deacons have been trending upward for years now. They've played in 6 consecutive bowls, which they have never done before. Hopefully they'll play in a 7th after this regular season. So again, looking back to your question, Billy, looking at that first game, really kind of felt good about the depth that Wake Forest had, and certainly at quarterback.
Stan, this slow mesh offense is so interesting to watch. And, the offensive coordinator, of course, big part of it, Ruggiero, and what he's been able to do, but also Dave Clawson. What is Vanderbilt going to see Saturday? What are they going to see from that offense? And I feel like people get lost in the fact that, yes, they run this slow mesh, but they also do other things. So what can we expect to see from this Wake Forest offense, especially with Sam Hartman back?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think pretty much anything. Vandy's defense had better be ready for the ball to be thrown around a lot. Wake does put it in the air, but at the same time, they feel very comfortable running the ball. And what Wake Forest does, and it's no secret, they make a lot of their snaps or a lot of their decisions, pardon me, after the snap of the football. So that falls on the shoulder of the quarterback, and that slow mesh that you talked about, and it is very slow, and it's really difficult to call on the radio because, it's not like other places typically where, pretty quickly, if it's a handoff or a keep or whatever. It takes a while sometimes. And Sam, you'll watch him ride the ball on the hip of the running back, count one, count two. It takes a long time. And he's just as likely to pull out of that and keep it, or pull out of that and throw the ball, not just to the flat, but downfield, as he is anything else. And so I think defensively, you have to know that going in, and certainly Coach Lee will have them coached up and they'll be looking for that. But it takes a lot of patience to defend this Wake offense. And it's, play after play after play and quarter after quarter. And maybe mentally that wears on you over the course of a, 3.5 hour football game. But, Wake's used to scoring a lot of points. They averaged right over 41 last year. Where Wake is going to try to be more consistent this year is on the defensive side of the ball. They got a new defensive coordinator in Brad Lambert, who was with Jim Groh back in the 06 ACC title year when Wake Forest went to the Orange Bowl. Brad since left, started the program at Charlotte's, been back to Marshall where he was years and years ago, has also been at Purdue as a coordinator, but he's back now at Wake Forest. He kind of, like Coach Clausen, understands a lot about, what does it take to be successful at a place like Wake Forest, at a place like Vanderbilt, where academics are so much a part of the recipe of these student athletes. So again, I think that Wake had a pretty good showing defensively against VMI, but Vanderbilt's no VMI. This is an offense that's going to give Wake some problems, and they got a great dual threat quarterback. Everybody knows that now, and so Wake will, without question, have his hands full.
We'll get to Vanderbilt and kind of some of the challenges they pose for Wake Forest here in a second, but I want to ask you one more thing about the Wake Forest offense. Obviously, Sam Hartman is a weapon for them, running the football, throwing the football. Who are the other guys outside of Hartman that Vanderbilt has to keep an eye on if they want to stay in this game?
Well, Wake's got a pretty good running back room. They'll use 2-3 backs in the game on Saturday, and Wake's really loaded at receiver. A.T. Perry's a first-team All-ACC guy from a year ago. Donovan Green is one of the highest recruited athletes that Wake's ever signed under Dave Clausen. He missed last year. He's another wideout, big, tall kid, really good athlete. Taylor Morin's a slot receiver. Keyshawn Williams, another slot receiver that Wake Forest considers both of those guys pretty much starters. Blake Whitehart, Dave Clausen has talked about him at tight end, maybe being the best overall tight end he's ever had at Wake Forest. And the Deacons have had some good ones in Dave Clausen's 9 years. So there are plenty of guys for Sam Hartman to throw to, plenty of guys to hand off to. So I think, again, that just goes back to some of the depth we were talking about earlier. Wake Forest has a lot of players it feels good about, that Dave Clausen is fine with being in the game, whether or not he starts. So just a lot of weapons, and you're liable to see all of them. And I think Mitch Griffiths last week against VMI threw the ball to 11 different people. And I think, if my tally's right, at least 4 running backs carried the ball, if not maybe 5, but certainly 4. That's a lot of people touching the ball. That's 11, not counting the quarterback. And that's a lot to keep track of.
Stan, I know you don't have to watch as much film as Coach Clausen probably does each week, but I know, you watch, been studying up on Vanderbilt. As you look at this Vanderbilt team, offensively, defensively, of course, led by Coach Lee, a guy that is familiar with Wake Forest, what type of challenges do they pose to Wake Forest, especially with Wake Forest coming on the road and playing at their stadium?
Well, the big one's got to be Mike Wright. I think the quarterback. I mean, he is, and the thing about him that you don't see every week is the great speed that he has at quarterback. He's a guy that can run away from you. And Coach Clausen's talked an awful lot this week about his speed. The fact that he's a track guy, a sprinter in the past, and so that that just adds to your headache, I think, as a defensive coordinator. And I know that Coach Lambert, the defensive coordinator for Wake, and other defensive coaches have spent an awful lot of time trying to figure out how to keep him bottled up and not let him get to the outside and run past him. And then, he's a capable thrower, certainly, of the ball too. I mean, anybody that's connected to 6 touchdowns in a game like he was last week is a guy that you've got to spend an awful lot of time on. And there's some of the kids on the defensive side of the ball that Wake Forest really, really likes, recruited, trying to get them to come to Winston-Salem. And so they're very respectful of that side of the ball as well. So this is, a Vanderbilt team that Wake Forest looks at being very improved over a year ago. I mean, it's a hard trip to go to Hawaii and play the Rainbows there and do what Vanderbilt did. Not many teams have been able to do that over the years, and came back and got a good win over Elon as well. So, Vanderbilt has done what it's needed to do in 2 games. Wake's only been tested once. Dicks are going to try to cut down on their penalties from a week ago, and that was one of the big areas of the game against VMI that Coach Clawson was not very happy with. And penalties are not a staple of his team. They don't commit very many errors like that, and so I think he was happy that game was on a Thursday night and had a couple extra days to work on that, make sure that the Deacons are much more disciplined with regard to penalties come Saturday.
Stan, we like to talk about X factors a lot of times, previewing games, especially on this podcast. So this guy's an X factor, or this player is an X factor for the team or for the game. If you had an X factor for this game, who would that be? Or, this has to happen, for Wake Forest to win this game, or even on the Vanderbilt side that you think could swing the game in either direction?
That's a good question and a hard one to answer. I think for Wake, we've talked an awful lot about Sam Hartman being back, but again, Mitch Griffiths was so good last week. I'm going to maybe throw out Ryan Smenda, who's another captain who wasn't able to play for Wake Forest last week. He was called for targeting in the Gator Bowl a year ago. And without going into too many crazy details, the scenario that kept him not only out of one half last week, but the whole game was kind of crazy. One that Coach Clawson's been very public about disagreeing with. This is a guy that couldn't even be on Wake's sidelines last week. He had to watch from somewhere else. But, he's kind of the quarterback of the defense, really. Just a very popular player. Another one like Sam Hartman, really great in the Wake locker room. And so he is a good football player, number one. But he is going to be just so anxious to get on the field. He'll have to work on kind of keeping, himself kind of reined in, so he keeps his composure on the field and doesn't lose sight of where he is. But he's been around for a while. He'll be able to do that. I'm really teasing, but for Wake Forest to have him back on top of Sam Hartman, I think that could really be an X factor with regard to Wake.
Can't wait to watch this. Real quick here, Stan. How have you? What do you expect to see from this Wake Forest crowd? This contention. Of course, they haven't been to Nashville since 2013. A lot of momentum, a lot of hype with this game and this program with what they were able to do last year. Do you see a decent contention of Demon Deacon fans making the trip to Nashville?
I hope so. And Wake's a school probably a lot like Vanderbilt that has a lot of people spread out over the country. I know that there are a lot of Wake Forest grads that live in the state of Tennessee, certainly in the Nashville area. I hope the weather, we've heard the weather forecast isn't too good. And so hopefully the rain will hold off and both Wake and Vandy fans can enjoy the game. I know it's an early start, which should be good. I mean, go in there and get it done, and everybody has the rest of the day and evening to enjoy. But, Wake's been a program that has traveled a whole lot better over the last several seasons. Wake's bowl games have been very well attended by Wake alums and fans throughout the country. So, who knows? Nashville's a great place to visit. And if you're going to travel anywhere this year, if you're a Wake fan, this might be the game to do it and enjoy the Music City and all that has to offer, plus a pretty good game between an ACC team and an SEC team. So I hope to see a lot Wake Forest fans. There'll be a lot of black and gold. I know that.
I was just going to say a lot of black and gold in that stadium on Saturday. Got an 11 a.m. kickoff on the SEC Network. Stan, bring your coffee to the booth with the early kickoff. Thanks for taking the time, and enjoy the broadcast on Saturday.
You bet, Billy. Thank you very much.